Mary Magdalene, the woman Jesus called by name. Who was Mary Magdalene? Was she a prostitute, a sinner, a saint, or something far more powerful? She walked with Jesus. She watched him die. And when the world went dark, she was the first to witness the light. This is the story of Mary Magdalene, the woman Jesus called by name. Mary Magdalene was a woman known by where she came from, Magdala, a town near the Sea of Galilee. In her time, Magdala was a thriving fishing village under Roman influence, a place of wealth, commerce, and culture. But behind the activity of her hometown, Mary carried a quiet torment. The Gospel of Luke tells us that Mary had been afflicted by 7 demons, a number often symbolic of deep spiritual or emotional bondage. Jesus cast the demons out of her. Whether those were literal demons, mental illness, trauma, or a combination of spiritual affliction and emotional pain, the number 7 symbolizes complete oppression. Mary Magdalene was completely bound until she met Jesus. Some scholars suggest she may have suffered from intense trauma or mental illness. Others view it as literal demonic oppression. Either way, Mary was not well. She was broken, isolated, and desperate. We don't get the details of her healing. The Bible doesn't describe the moment Jesus freed her. It simply states the fact she had been delivered. And from that moment on, her life changed. She became one of the very few women who followed Jesus closely. In Luke 8 verses 1-3, she is named among a group of women who not only traveled with Jesus and the disciples, but also supported his ministry financially. This means Mary Magdalene had resources. She gave not only her heart but her life, her time, and her wealth to the mission of the kingdom. For centuries, Mary Magdalene was wrongly labeled a prostitute. This began in 591 AD when Pope Gregory the Great confused her with the unnamed sinful woman in Luke 7 who wept at Jesus' feet. But nowhere in Scripture is Mary described as sexually immoral. That reputation stuck for over 1,000 years. But today scholars widely agree that Mary Magdalene was not a former prostitute. She was a faithful follower and witness. Her identity has been slowly restored. Mary Magdalene was present during many key moments in Jesus' ministry. But it is during his crucifixion and resurrection that she plays her most powerful role. When Jesus was arrested and sentenced to death, most of his male disciples fled in fear. But Mary Magdalene stayed. She stood at the foot of the cross and watched him suffer. She saw his body taken down and laid in the tomb. She was among the first to return after the Sabbath to care for his body. While the world watched from a distance, she stayed close, faithful, grieving. On the 3rd day, early in the morning, Mary returned to the tomb to anoint his body. But the stone had been rolled away. The tomb was empty. She ran to tell the disciples and then returned again, standing there in sorrow. And in that moment, broken, confused, crying, she heard a voice. "Woman, why are you crying?" a man asked. He assumed he was the gardener. But then he said her name, Mary, and everything changed. It was Jesus, alive, risen, and he had chosen her, the woman once tormented, once misunderstood, once cast aside, to be the first witness of the resurrection. In John 20 verse 17, Jesus tells her, "Go to my brothers and tell them." Mary became the apostle to the apostles, the first to proclaim the good news that he is risen. No one else in the Gospels receives such a direct, personal commissioning. What happened to her after the resurrection? The Bible doesn't say. But early church traditions suggest she continued to serve faithfully. Some accounts say she went to Ephesus with John. Others claim she lived quietly, always known as the first witness of the risen Lord. What is certain is that her legacy endured. Over the centuries, Mary Magdalene has been reimagined and misunderstood, sometimes romanticized, sometimes vilified. But at her core, she is a testimony to the power of grace. She was not defined by her past or her pain. She was defined by the one who called her name. Jesus didn't just heal her. He entrusted her with the greatest message in history. Mary Magdalene is a reminder that no one is too broken to be used. That Jesus sees the outcast, the misunderstood, the dismissed, and calls them by name. She followed him when others walked away. She stayed through the suffering. She waited in the silence. And when the stone rolled away, she was there. After the resurrection, Mary Magdalene's life did not return to normal, because nothing about the world was normal anymore. She had seen death undone. She had touched hope alive again. And from that moment she carried not just a memory but a mission. She walked the same streets where she was once shamed, but this time with quiet strength. People who used to whisper now listened. She didn't preach in temples or write letters like Paul. She didn't stand in the synagogues like Peter. But her presence was its own kind of gospel. She would have told her story again and again. Not with pride but with awe. That she, a woman once tormented, once invisible, had been seen. Had been called and was chosen. She would have told of the voice that said her name. Not in judgment, but in love. In the early years of the church, tradition says she may have followed the Apostle John to Ephesus, helping care for the fledgling Christian communities. Others say she lived in quiet obscurity, always faithful, always praying, always remembering. She may not have written scripture, but her life was a living testimony. What we do know is that her witness remained. When the disciples preached Christ risen, they remembered who saw him first. When people doubted, they recalled her tears in the garden, her voice trembling as she told them, "I have seen the Lord." And when the early church faced persecution, when believers were scattered, hunted, martyred, it's easy to imagine Mary staying faithful through it all. Because she had already seen the worst and seen love rise above it. She never stopped following, never stopped remembering. And in her old age, perhaps when the world had changed and her name had begun to fade from memory, she would still whisper the word that changed everything for her. Mary. Because it wasn't just a name. It was the moment her life was rewritten. And maybe in the quiet of prayer, in the solitude of her thoughts, she would smile. Not because life had been easy, but because she had once been lost, and was found. That's the legacy of Mary Magdalene. Not perfection. Not fame, but faith. Faith that followed Jesus when it was dangerous. Faith that waited when it seemed hopeless. Faith that held on even when the world said, "You don't matter." And maybe, just maybe, her story lives on so powerfully not because she was extraordinary, but because she believed in a love that was. This is the story of Mary Magdalene. A woman delivered. A disciple devoted. A witness chosen. A name called in love. Mary Magdalene's name echoes through history. Because she stayed. When others fled, she followed. When hope died, she waited. And when Jesus rose, he chose her. Not because she was perfect, but because she believed. The same Jesus who called Mary is still calling today. By name. Calling in love. And in power.